screenplay writer Meg LeFauve. Welcome, Meg. We are so privileged to have you with us, Meg.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Great. We are so privileged to have you with us, Meg. It's a great honor.
Well, thanks for having me. It's really, really fun.
Sure. I really hope this will be a very interesting session for everyone watching as well.
Great.
So we'll move on to the questions, Meg?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So let's get to know the little Meg LeFauve a bit. What was she like in her childhood? What were her interests?
I was writing since I could hold a pencil. The very first thing I wrote, I think the letters were this big and slanted because I couldn't hold the pencil, and it was 3 sentences with flowers drawn all around it. So I've always been a storyteller. I loved Bugs Bunny. I don't know if you guys had Bugs Bunny, and
of course.
Yeah, I assume Bugs Bunny is international. That was I wasn't a Disney kid. I know there are a lot of people, including my cousin Kim, they were huge Disney fans, and I still, of course, love Disney, but it was all Bugs Bunny for me. And then I did write as a kid. I then went to school to be a writer in college, but then I immediately became scared that I had nothing to write about. And who was I to think that I could write anything? What stories did I have to tell? So I went and became an executive in Hollywood instead, and then eventually came back around.
Oh, so that creative flair was always within since childhood.
Yeah, I think that the stories were always there. You have to learn your craft, but I working at Pixar, meeting all those artists, they also were drawing, they just drew, they just knew, it was just in them, and it was something that they wanted to do. And I felt the same way about storytelling.
Great. So did you know that you would or want to make movies when you grew up?
I don't know that I knew that it was a thing you could do. I mean, I knew I didn't want to be an actor, right? I didn't necessarily want to be an actor, and I certainly could see that job, but I don't think I understood that you could be a writer of movies until much later, when I was actually in high school thinking about what I wanted to do, and saw that there was actually such a thing as film schools and film writing. But even then, honestly, freshman year, I didn't go to school to be a film writer. I went to be a journalist because that was something I could tell my father, and it made sense. And you could get a job. I mean, now maybe you can't, maybe it's harder now, but at the time you could get a job. So I went to school to be a journalist, and then quickly switched over once I was out from under.
Your heart was always there.
Well, and once you're not at home, and you can just be like, I'm going to make my own life. And so I did. I switched over to be a screenwriting major. I think my father didn't understand and still was worried about it. Like, how are you going to make a living doing that? But I did, and I am. So it worked out.
Great. So you started off as a producer in the industry, and a very successful one at that too. And when and how did you start writing? What led you to don the new hat?
Well, I was an executive working with Jodie Foster, the actress, for 10 years, working at her company and eventually running it. And all that time I met incredible writers, incredible directors, incredible artists of all kinds. And all of them, and especially Jodie, taught me storytelling the way I know it now. I really was, she really did mentor me, Jodie. But at some point after 10 years, I realized, I'm never going to do it if I don't do it right now. I didn't want to be 80 years old and wonder what stories could I have told if I was brave enough. Often we don't do what we want to do because there's some voice in our head telling us we can't, or you'll never make it. That voice is often a liar. It means well. It's trying to keep you safe. But sometimes you just have to know it's not necessarily telling you the truth, and that you have to be brave and kind of jump off.
And just take the chance and
you just got to do it, right? you got to do it smart. I was able to, because I had a job, save money. I was married, my husband had a job, so I was able to do that financially. And I quit, and everybody thought I was crazy. I had the best job in Hollywood, working for one of the smartest, nicest people in Hollywood. And then I had to do, in the movies, I would have quit and then I would have become a phoenix. That's not how it works in real life. In real life, you quit and then you start over, because now I'm starting. I have to learn the craft. Like, I could talk about screenwriting. I could help other people with their scripts, but that's a completely different part of your brain.
Definitely.
Like literally physically a different part of your brain. The dreaming brain was much less skilled. And so I had to go like any artist and learn my craft. And it's layers and layers and layers of craft to learn. So I wrote a lot of bad stuff. I wrote a lot of drafts of bad stuff until finally I had something that I felt like, okay, I was getting enough feedback that it was working and it was good that I could go out and started my career with it.
So you had a very settled life and then you took the leap of faith.
I did. I took a leap of faith. And one thing that helped me take the leap of faith that I always recommend to people is I kind of set what I call a beacon, like a light on the water, right? And it's really far away. When I started, it was a pinprick on the water, but I tried to be as specific as I could with what I wanted. Right. And when you're a writer and for screenplays, you have to know what your character wants. So it's good for you to feel a want, right? So that you know what that is, that kind of drive to get something is what your character is going to need. So what's yours, right? So I set a beacon of wanting to write for Pixar. I did. I swear that I did. Because at the time, they were some of the best storytellers in the business. I didn't necessarily set a beacon to work in animation. I set a beacon to work at Pixar because of their storytelling. I loved their storytelling and I wanted to learn from them. So I suggest setting a beacon that is as scary as it is exciting. And by scary, I mean, it's going to push you. It's going to ask a lot of you. It's going to ask you to rise and push to your best effort. And certainly working at Pixar and being in that brain trust room is a scary, exciting thing. And it did happen, which is pretty amazing. I mean, it didn't go A to B. Like, again, in the movie, I'd pick the beacon, I'd have my act 2, and then I'd be there. But no, of course, in real life, it goes A, D, X, Y. You know, you
never go straight.
But you never know why it is that you're someplace, and you should ask yourself, why am I here? What do I have to learn? What should I be curious about? You know, why has my life put me here? You've made a choice here. Everybody here on this beautiful Zoom tonight, well, my night, your morning, chose to be here. So it's great. So you're creating your life just the way your character in Act 2 would be creating their lives.
You designed it the way you want.
You decide. Yeah, you decide your life. Yeah.
Great. So Inside Out was probably the second animated feature film from Pixar after Brave to have a female lead and also your first experience with an animated feature. How challenging was it working on a story that had so many deep nuances about human emotions and psyche, all the while being a children's movie?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy hard because, you know, if we were in the ocean, there's a certain context, right? You can go research the ocean and, you know, the mind, you know, Pete was very clear, Pete Docter, my co-writer and the director, and really the father of this, the beautiful genius of this movie. He definitely didn't want it to be in the brain. He wanted it to be in the mind, right? So we're not talking capillaries and blood vessels. We're talking about the mind. It's all metaphor. It's harder too, because now, well, what is it, you know? So it was really hard. Pete did a tremendous amount of research on emotions and knew which emotions he wanted. They had done a lot of exploratory art and creativity in terms of where to go. But when I came on, they were really struggling with what's the story. So my job was to kind of take this genius and these geniuses, you know, Josh Cooley, the head of story, and Ronnie Del Carmen, the co-director, another incredible genius. And there was all of this stuff on the table. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, but what's the story? And how do we get a structure in here? How do we make it clear? And how do we make it emotional? And where are all these layers of emotion and joy's journey? So I was really my father was a mechanical engineer and my mother was a painter. So I feel like my brain does both, right? It takes all
left and the right brain.
Right, it takes both. So I kind of engineered, if that makes sense, the story. And the way we did it for kids is we didn't think about it at all. We did a movie that we would want to see and that we challenged us and made us laugh hysterically. You have to make each other laugh. And made us every day, you know, I will tell you in edit, in storyboards, every time Joy hands those core memories over to Sadness at the end, we would all tear up. Every time Riley came home and said to her parents, basically, you want me to be happy, but I'm not, we would tear up. So you know it's working because you've seen it a lot and you're still feeling teary. It's really, it's firing, it's working. So it was a tremendously challenging, tremendously rewarding. I was so lucky to be helping get that movie, helping form that movie.
The emotions, it might have been very tangled and chaotic, and you had to sort it out, do a lot of research on each emotion. Yeah, there would have been a lot of research.
He really wanted pick the 5 emotions. I mean, there's a lot of different schools of thought of how many there are. He picked the 5, and he liked that each one is very clear and is a very clear character, and he knew what would trigger it. What would trigger each emotion. Anger is about fairness, and he did. So we knew but we really needed Joy's journey, right? Like, what is Joy experiencing? Where is she starting? Where is she finishing? What is she learning from Sadness on this journey? It was a lot of just basic, and I mean that in terms of high art storytelling, in terms of what is the story.
Great. So who would you say is your favorite emotion from Inside Out? Which is your favorite?
Well, I was writing, and we were writing very, very fast, which is good, I think, because you can't resist it. It's just coming. You got to just go. Sometimes that's the best creativity, right? It's like improv. Just go. I remember writing in my office, and it was Joy and Sadness were talking to each other, and all of a sudden, like as if I'm watching the movie, Sadness just laid down, and I was like, oh, there she is. And I loved writing Sadness. I really did. Her big heart and all of her doubts and her worry, and she doesn't know what's happening to her and why she's doing this. Joy was harder to write at first because incessantly happy people can be annoying. So that edge of annoying, but as soon as you get Amy Poehler, it's just so clear, right? Like because her happiness is all about wanting you to be happy. Right. There's a big difference between happiness and saying, I know how to make you happy. That's a very kind of ego-driven happiness. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted Joy to really want you to be happy, and you could be happy. And yet she has her edges. She has to, because she's and the way that Amy, her characters are just so big-hearted. So that was fun.
Great. So we have heard that Pixar has an evolving process when it comes to their projects. How has it helped you as a writer, and how challenging can such changes be?
Pixar is a place of iteration, meaning, and it was hard for me as a writer, because as a feature live action writer, you get either you've written the script by yourself, or you get the job and you go off and you write it by yourself, right? All by yourself. And then you hand it over to a producer or director, they give you notes, and then you go off by yourself again. Pixar and any animation studio is much more like television. It's a room full of people breaking a story. You might go off and write the whole thing, but if you're in early development, or you might write pieces if you're already moving towards in storyboards. And those storyboard artists are all incredible storytellers in and of themselves, just plussing and adding and challenging in all the best ways. It's much more of a group experience. I learned a lot from it, because I realized that all these artists, since they were little kids, were drawing in sketchbooks. And so to them, it's iterate, draw it again, turn the page. And writing, I didn't have that in my head that way, right? Like, I wrote it and I was like, there it is, right? That at Pixar, it's very iterative. It's like, can you go again? Let's get notes. Let's go again. And it's a very pure process, in that the only rule the only should is this the best story? Is this
we work until the best outcome is there?
Is it the best? It's not about egos and politics or whatever else can happen at other places I've worked. It's really about, is this the best story? And it's so supportive, and so much about people giving new ideas. I mean, listen, it's your brain starts to fry after a while, because you're like, can I write this scene again? But you can, and it's going to be better. So when I meet emerging writers who are new to it, or young animators who don't have that iteration going, there's a lack of depth because that iterative process hasn't happened, right? And when they get too precious with it and they're like, but I drew all these drawings, or I wrote all these pages, and it's like, I know, and you're going to do a lot more, let's go.
That is how it works.
The energy that you put out is what returns. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of reward too.
Nothing but the best. Yeah, settle for nothing but the best. Yeah. So how closely do you work with the art department when it comes to writing for animation films or shows?
It's very much the director's job to be working with the art department. There's a head of story who's working with the story department. I'm involved much more with story in that I might be asked about it, or I have to keep track of, well, you put that joke in, but this falls down if you do that. So I loved being part of the story department. I just loved it. It was so fun as a writer. Art, I wouldn't go to those meetings or anything, but it does affect you, right? Like if I remember once in Inside Out, Pete went to a production design meeting where they were talking about the world and the layout of the mind. And he came in and he was like, well, we moved long-term memory. And I was like, what do you mean you moved it? And he's like, well, it used to be on the edge and now it's in the middle. And I'm like, it's a road movie. That means she has to go there first, not last. Like it does affect it. But I was working on The Good Dinosaur, and we were going so fast on that movie. And I knew we were going to have a cattle wrestler scene. I didn't know what dinosaurs the cattle wrestlers were. I have no idea. And all of a sudden, Pete Selmox, and he's like, look what came in from art. And they had mullets. And I was like, okay, all right, I got it. I got what they are. So it was almost a great conversation between a lot of these incredible artists. So that's my favorite part, is when the character design begins to inform back as a writer. But by the time you get very deep into that, hopefully the writing is done, or it's really much the director who's doing that. And I'm trying to keep up.
Great. Got it. So how was your experience with working with Marvel, and especially working with Kevin Feige, the mind behind the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as we know? How was your experience, Meg?
I was in very early on Captain Marvel, and I was in with the brilliant Nicole Perlman, who wrote Guardians of the Galaxy. We were teamed up, and as wonderful as it was to help create a Marvel movie, the best part was meeting Nicole Perlman. Just a great human being and person, and also writer. So what we did is we had to read all of course, the comic books of Captain Marvel. Nicole knew the canon of Marvel very, very well. I didn't know it as well as she did by an eighth, but I knew Captain Marvel from reading it, and we had to come up with the story. So again, it was an iterative process in that we would come up with pieces and then put them in a shape and pitch them to Kevin Feige and the execs at Marvel. And they would give us feedback, and then we'd go again and go again and go again. So it started to coalesce into, there's a story that's a movie, right? And it was very much, it also had to be, of course, personal to us, because that's the best writing comes out of something from your heart and from your guts. Definitely. And from your spirit and soul. So, I was very interested in women being trained to not fail, that if more women are taught they have to be perfect, the less they can fail, the less they can evolve and succeed, because to succeed means you have to fail. And I was just so curious about that. And Nicole and I were so curious about that, and how that worked in our lives, and how that worked in the women's lives that we knew, and and not just in women, but in people's lives. Like what happens when your belief that you're not powerful is because you believe it. Yes. But in fact, you're incredibly powerful. You just have to take off at the time when we take off the cuff, right? You can take it off, but you've still bought the brainwashing that you're not powerful. So that's kind of where that came from. And then you're going to the canon to look for what metaphors, what main relationship would be the best one to help teach her that, who antagonist would be the best to help teach her that, etc. And then it changed and evolved very much once it went into script with the directors, of course, and they made it their own. And what we gave them was the pot, if that makes sense, the little pot with the dirt and the seeds, and then it really made it. It's their movie, right?
Yeah.
And Kevin is just the smartest, nicest guy. He truly is, and deeply just loves what he does. Just loves it. He loves all those characters. He loves it, and so it was really. It gives you a lot of energy and passion to work for something
when we do what we are loving. Yeah. Great. So for stories of characters such as Captain Marvel, they have an established universe. How did you approach the story, and what kind of research or study went in from your side?
Well, like I said, it was very much knowing the canon, knowing her all of her books and how to draw from them. I really relied a lot on Nicole for the canon of what we could use that was a great metaphor or storytelling device for expressing that story. So it was really, and of course the executives at Marvel really helped there too. So it was just knowing, you just have to know it. You just have to know it. And so that was my job. How fun a job is that?
It's definitely fun. I know that you are doing what you love is like the most happy thing someone can do, most fulfilling content thing someone can do, and I'm really jealous that you are able to do it.
Yeah, like even when you have a bad day, you're like, but I'm doing it. I'm doing,
that's right.
The challenge is towards it. So
yeah. So did you have to read all the comics as part of the writing team?
Yeah, of course. For Captain Marvel, you had to read them all, and I'm sure we read them multiple times. And because every time you're pulling something, you're discovering something new and going back. And
okay. Or generally, do you read comics, Meg?
I'm not. I wasn't a big. My brothers were. I had two brothers who both were big comic guys, so they were around. I was aware of all these stories, right? I'm sure I read a couple of them, but no, I wasn't a big. Huge, like Nicole is a huge, she's a big fan and knew.
So since they were around, you were informed about it, but then you were not so into it.
It wasn't about into it. It was just, I don't think I was exposed. It's funny. I grew up, I'm an old lady. I grew up when that was the boys, what they did,
Okay.
No fun.
Got it. So when it comes to reading, what are your favorite spare time reads?
I love historical fiction because I love to watch the patterns of people, and that we're repeating patterns over and over, watching COVID hit and, love to everybody in India. And I know it's incredibly hard right now. But, we've been here before with pandemics, and same doubts about vaccines have been here before. And, I just love history as a way to tell a story in a beautiful kind of resonant echo. So I love reading historical fiction. Like I just finished Hilary Mantel's third book in her trilogy about Cromwell. So that's what I love. So even when I, that would be my next beacon. My dream is to do something historical. So we'll see.
Really great, really great. When we know about history, we'll know something from the grassroots level, from where it came and how it is existing right now, right?
It just helps you see now, and it can help you see into the future. Even when I'm building fantasy worlds, I really believe all that understanding of history informs it, right? Because we're just kind of rebuilding that same political structure or whatever, look at Game of Thrones. Come on. That is medieval War of the Roses. That's what that is. And, the bastard, but once you start to read that history, you're like, okay, there weren't zombies. But the richness of that series, I believe is coming because he really understood the history.
Yeah. It's like a jigsaw, and when we all bring it together, we can also predict the future if we know the history well, to an extent. So then there are different elements in a story that keep it progressing through time. Is it the characters or the situation that inspire you more while writing them?
I know there's definitely writers who love to write action and the situation inspires them. And maybe it's because I was trained by an actor and a director. I'm definitely about the character. And as Jody used to say, it's about the human condition.
Okay.
And what do we have to say to the audience in terms of this character's journey? And so I love that catharsis. Right. So for me, it was very, very important that what is Joy learning at the end of Act 2 in that dump that, oh my God, I've been trying to keep sadness away from Joy, but from Riley, but sadness is what connects us all. Right. Like to me, that was a revolutionary idea that Pete Docter was putting forward. That's an idea that can change the world. So instead of pushing your sadness away and hiding it and pretending it doesn't exist, accept it. And that actually opens your heart and changes yourself, and it changes the world and your relationships because you're being more authentic. All of that is stuff that I think has gone out into the world through Pete Docter's movie. It's definitely impacted that movie has definitely impacted the special needs community.
Definitely.
And we still get letters, and even The Good Dinosaur, I get messages of people whose children are watching it because their parent died and they're processing it through watching the movie. And so that's a great movie about loss and coming into your own and finding a new identity after such a loss. And I lost my father. So that, there's echoes of that in that movie. So for me, it's starting with that kind of, I have a podcast in which I try to help teach the emerging writers and coming up. And it's called The Screenwriting Life. And on that podcast, I talk about lava, that being an artist, be that a writer, a fine artist, an animator, anytime you're going to storytell through your art, you have to go into your authentic self. And that is very vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable place to be. Actor, whatever, you have to be vulnerable. And I call that the lava. You got to get into the lava a little bit. And that's what I love to do. It's hard in my own writing, but I love helping people get into their lava. I love helping them do the craft, and the podcast does a lot of that. But that's kind of where I love to be and talk about, why do people do what they do?
I guess you see yourself in them. You were there once. So you like to.
Yeah, I mean, how beautiful is storytelling that you can show a person that is so very different from you, but by the end of the movie, they are you, and you identify so deeply with them. Storytelling to me is the stuff that keeps us all together.
Great. So having spoken about both, which is your personal favorite, writing for live action or animation?
It's whatever, it's so funny because if I'm whenever I start doing it, I love it, and I'm back, and in animation, it's all the ideas coming and all these people, and there's so much creativity, and then there's a moment where I'm like, everybody go away. I need to be alone. I need to build it. Oh my God, I wish I was in live action because I could just write a script. And then when you're writing live action, you're like, oh my gosh, I can be alone and I can just write this and do what I want. And then you're like, wait, where is everybody? Where are all these? wait. So, I'm just fickle. I like both, and I like to do both. And I like going back and forth. And I also like TV. I've been developing TV as well because I find TV is a nice combo. It's mine, and I get to create a show, and yet it's a group, and there's going to be a room. And so I think TV, I think, is the next place I'm going to go.
That was a very tricky question because I knew that you would like both equally.
Right.
So one of your most memorable moments from one of your own writings, do you have something to share?
The end of, well, there's so many, but the end of Inside Out, when Riley comes back to her parents and says, you want me to be happy, but I'm not. In essence, I didn't even know. I had to write that very fast. And so it was great because, like I said, it just kind of came up. And then I didn't even know until we were in the big screening room and I'm looking at the movie, because in animation, as I'm sure most of your viewers know, you board the movie, you goes to edit, there's sound, we all go into a theater, 200 of us go into theater from all over Pixar, and the Disney logo comes up, and you watch the movie in boards.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in there with 200 people. And that scene comes up of Riley and her parents. And I just feel this kind of sweat break out because I was like, oh, this is what I wanted to say to my parents when I was 11 years old. You want me to be happy, but I'm not. And I felt so exposed, like so, like, oh my God. And then the movie starts, the movie was over, and it used to end, and nobody said a word. Like dead silence. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, well, I'm fired. I'm totally fired. I'm getting fired because there was no clapping, nothing. And I walked out into the atrium at Pixar and I was like, well, I have to go to Brain Trust now. And I'm just scared to go because nobody nobody said a word walking out. I'm just going to the bathroom. Like, I got to go to the bathroom because I got to get myself together here. I got to get myself together. And I walked in the bathroom and the women in there were crying from the movie.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, I'm not getting fired.
There was like, enough proof for that.
Right. And I bring that up just because I really, under the deadline, just brought up something that was very personal to me, made me feel very vulnerable. Was something that I don't think I was ever brave enough to say to my parents, but Riley was going to do it and be this surrogate for me to say it, that I think kids need to be able to say their emotions and where they are, no matter if it makes their parents upset or not, right? Because that's their truth, that's their reality. And so that has a lot of meaning to me. And of course, with my, I lost my father, so The Good Dinosaur has many, many, many moments in it that I love, but I really love when they're together in the cave and they find out through doing stick figures that each of them have lost parents and they see each other really for the first time beyond the exterior and the judgment. They bond. That bonding moment was so I like those moments that I get to write or find and push myself to of that authentic, take all the layers off that people use to hide and stay safe. And it's usually between two people, right? Like, we go to the movie for relationship to see a relationship, right?
Yeah.
That's what we love. So that's what I love writing.
So it's like a part of you, since it's like your child. Whatever you had to tell your parents, it's coming out through you. And I am pretty sure that everyone who watched the movie had the same feeling. Definitely.
That's the goal. That's the goal. If you can be very honest, then you will. When I was a producer, I could sometimes tell right the page that a writer stopped being honest and started writing with their head and what they think they should be doing versus what that story wanted to do. I could tell you the page because authentic writing has a tone and a depth to it. Yeah. Again, I'm not talking tone in terms of it doesn't have to be serious. It could be silly and goofy. I mean, some of the best comedians we've ever had in the world are some of the darkest, most pained people. I mean, the comedy is coming up, right? From that authentic lava, as I call it on the podcast. So that's really the work. After you learn the craft, the work is to be brave enough to bring that out and be an artist.
Definitely. True, very true. So going to the next question, Meg. For students who would like to pursue a career in screenwriting, what would be the 5 things you would advise them to do to make it big in the industry?
Yes. Okay. So I thought about this because you would let me even ask this question, and I'm glad you did. So the first thing is, if you want to write, you have to write, which I know sounds ridiculous. Why would that even be my first thing? But you would not believe how many people I meet who talk about writing, who are in groups to talk about writing, who take classes to talk about writing, but they're not writing. And that your brain, like I said at the beginning, the part of your brain that can talk about writing is not the part of your brain that writes. So the only way the part of your brain that writes is going to learn is to write a lot of bad stuff. Like Everybody writes bad stuff at first. Everybody, I don't care if you're a genius who's won Academy Awards, if your first draft is all about what doesn't work. I call it a barf draft, right? So this is why I created the podcast, because I want to help you write and write badly and just do it, just write. So you have to write, and you have to write a lot. I say to emerging writers and to professionals and to myself, sometimes it's about quantity over quality. Because you can get so bogged down in it being good that you don't do it. Well, then you're not doing it. So just be bad. And, when I have worked with creators at the top of their game, the one thing they can do or have learned to do is just be bad. They'll just be bad. They'll just be like, yeah, I know that doesn't work. But you know what I like about it is I like this. None of this works. Right, that I just spent a month on, but that is interesting. Let's pull that out, right? There's not this preciousness to it. So the first thing is write. The second thing is, yes, writing is rewriting. Everybody can write a first draft. Everybody can write a barf draft. Everybody can write a first act. That's good. Now it's the writing, the writer has to come in the rewriting process. So if you have a script, be it for a short or a full feature or a TV spec pilot, I want you to rewrite it at least 5 times. And I don't mean rewrite it on the top. I mean rewrite the whole thing. Because again, it's an iterative process. As you write, you might have started out thinking it's this character as the main character. And by the time you get to the end and get your notes, you're like, oh, that's not even the main character. It's this. Okay, go again. It's this. Now what? Now what's the main relationship? So rewrite and get notes. Have people who will give you notes. It could be anybody, honestly. Don't worry. We all want it to be people in the industry. It doesn't have to be. People can read. Just ask them what they got and what they didn't. It's just information coming in. I have a whole episode on taking notes because that can be super hard. But you also need that group to support you as you go, and who is going to call you up and say, hey, how are you doing? Keep going. When I went from producing to writing, I had a group of advisors, my counsel, who sometimes would just say, keep going, right? It's a craft. You have to learn the craft. So like anything, and a lot of the people who maybe want to be screenwriters are also already artists. So you had to learn your art. You had to learn line and composition and shape and many things. That writing is the same. There's layers of craft. You have to learn it. You can learn it by reading scripts on the page. I really recommend that. So you can see how it's written, and you can learn by taking classes. So I'm not saying don't take classes, but don't take classes instead of writing. Take classes that make you write. And then the last thing is, like we talked about tonight, is keep it personal. Really try to dig to the personal. Do your very best. Even if it's funny and it's delightful, I'm so glad that it is, and that's great. And have your big trailer moments and all the fun stuff. But what is personal about it? Where are you? Where are you in here? Because the animators, the storytellers who can put themselves in their work, ones who I believe rise out of the general noise, right? Who become artists. Pete Docter can tell you that Inside Out came because he watched his 11-year-old daughter, who used to be silly and goofy, turn 11 and suddenly get very quiet. And it broke his heart. Where did my happy girl go? I want to go in her head and find out. Or Andrew Stanton can talk about being a dad and not knowing how to be a good dad. Do you save your kid from the top of the jungle gym, or do you let him fall? They had these personal questions, right? That they're now bringing to these fantastical worlds. So and if you don't know it, that's okay, because sometimes the conscious brain doesn't know it, but just keep pushing towards anything that makes you feel uncomfortable or vulnerable. It's sitting right in there. And as you write more and more drafts, the clarity will come, and you'll be able to talk about it more. You'll be able to talk about redemption or forgiveness or loss, or even if you just have those big words, that'll help you. So I'd say those are the 5 big things. And, so write, rewrite and get notes, learn, come on my podcast and listen. That's what I'm doing it for. And make it personal. Make it personal.
When we make it personal, it's very original. That's when it works.
Where the originality will come. It will, because the more personal it gets, the more specific it gets. And oddly, the more specific it gets, the more universal it gets.
And people can relate to it, and Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Very true, man.
Yeah.
And next, Meg, the last question. In
Yeah.
a fairly male dominated industry, you have raised your name amongst the stalwarts and have become an inspiration to many women out there, including me. A few words of inspiration for the many women among our audience from India.
Um, I would say this to anyone, but especially women. I don't take no for an answer. Now, sometimes the answer is no, and you have to move on. I'm not saying that. But in a general way, I tend to be a little bit of a dog with a bone. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if you tell me I can't, I go, really? I can't? I can't do that. There's no way, because what if I did this, or how about this, or I could do it this way? What if I did it that way? So I just, some people might call it grit. I just call it stubbornness. Again, that doesn't mean I don't take notes and I don't evolve and I don't work with people, but I'm just talking about that deeper interior thing that sometimes women have grown up with, that you're supposed to fit in this box and you're not supposed to upset people, and you're really here to service other people's dreams.
True.
And I think women are taught to be of service, and service is beautiful. So I'm not saying don't do that. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a friend. I'm a writer who is giving to my director, right? So I do that, but I also do my stuff. I also bring myself. I also am an artist in my own right. I also want to manifest what I'm here to manifest. Sometimes that's with other people. Sometimes I'm leading, sometimes I'm not, but your power base needs to stay inside you. And women are taught to put our power out in other people, for these other people to determine our value, our worth.
True.
Your value and worth is inside of yourself, and it just is. And now what are you going to do with it? So it's very Captain Marvel, right? So what are you going to do with it, right? So and the thing to help you is to do that is to have that support group around you, right? So your girlfriends or your guy friends can remind you, hey, wait, where's your power base right now? Is it inside of you or outside of you? Because by the way, this happens to me all the time, where I'll be sitting in a meeting, all of a sudden be like, oh, my power base is totally sitting over there, and that guy, I got to take a breath because he's right. But that doesn't mean I have no value or whatever, right? Have a beacon, have a goal. Doesn't matter how crazy it is. It was crazy for me to say I was going to write at Pixar. Have a beacon, because what a beacon is, and what I'm asking you to do is have a want. Because a lot of women, again, are not taught to want. We're taught to know what everybody else wants. So that sometimes when I work with emerging young female writers, they don't actually even really know what a want is. Not really, because it's so taboo to want something.
Yes.
Right? We're always given, well, you can want to help a kid, or you want a love, but that, really, that's all. We can't just want to save the world, or want, so just want it, and try to find a way to feel safe wanting something. Set your beacon. It can be private if it needs to be. And be stubborn about it. Be a little bit stubborn about it.
Usually to women, they feed it to, like, whatever they want, it's usually unheard. The society feeds it to them and they are supposed to swallow it. It's more like that. But I feel that women are changing these days. I feel that they're breaking out of the box and out of the cage.
Sometimes that want has been given to us so young, we don't even recognize it as something we don't want. And so the very first step can be, ask yourself, ask your body. Your head might tell you, yes, you want it because it means money and it'll make your parents happy. And you were and all the tapes and things that you were told. But does your body want it? Because your body doesn't lie. Is your body leaning in towards it, or is it leaning away from it? Does it make you feel nervous in that kind of excited way? That's scared, but that your nervous system is scared, but because it's so excited by it? Or is it scared because it's like, I don't want that? You just have to learn to tune in to it, and then the rest of it will just start happening, because that's a huge step for a lot of women to take.
Yeah.
Just to ask, just start by asking yourself, do I really want this?
True.
And you might be like, I don't know. Okay, great. You don't know. Today you don't know. Don't judge it. You don't know. Just keep asking.
True, very true. Like, I think it's listening to ourselves is the best way to know whether it's a taboo or not.
Yeah. And yeah, but because we're not trained to listen to ourselves. So
So yeah, ma'am. And I think we have a few questions from
okay,
our
great.
audience.
Yep.
I'll go to them one by one. So Rakesh is asking, we are in the midst of a pandemic. How relevant are these discussions on art and creativity?
Well, I would say good question. At the premiere of The Good Dinosaur, there was a French journalist there, and the Charlie Hebdo shooting had just happened. And he asked me the same question. When we've just had a massacre in France, why are we going to an animated movie? And, I think that art exists to remember and express the human condition. So there is a pandemic going on, but I'm hopefully speaking to the artists who are going to express through their art the pain and loss of it so that we remember.
Yeah.
And that's what art is here for. So this to me is about supporting artists, telling their stories, and the pandemic, of course, and the huge loss of it, and the fear and all of that. That's the lava that's going to come up in the work, and the world needs that. We need that.
Very true. So, and next question is from Hiran, and she's asking, in your opinion, has the collaborative writers' room process been affected by pandemic-induced remote working systems? If yes, how do you manage it? Do you want me to repeat the question?
No. Everything's on Zoom now. It affects it in that I do get something from the room energetically, and watching people's body language is much harder. Just sitting in a room and staring at cards because you can't figure it out, or taking a walk together, or all of that, or meeting over coffee in the atrium, all of that casual crossing and bubbling isn't happening. But we're still doing it. I'm still online with the director. And often as a writer of live action, you're often online with the director because he's in Europe shooting a blah, blah, and you're doing the next one. It's not completely foreign to live action to be away from your director. But it affects it, but I think it's something that we've handled, and we're still in it.
Sure. And the next question is, how do you feel the female narrative has shaped, changed, or improved in animation and entertainment industry in the course of your career?
How do I feel? Can you say it one more time?
How do you feel the female narrative has shaped, changed, or improved in animation and entertainment industry in the course of your career?
The female narrative, is it?
Yep.
Well, certainly, wow, at Pixar, there are amazing young women coming up right now who are directing, and amazing young women. It's really landing now. And when I first went to Pixar, it was all about mentoring the young women and young artists, right? In terms of their ideas and talking and blah, blah, all that stuff that we're talking about today. So I think it's just in live action too. It's just, there is a huge push towards having women and people of color tell their stories. And listen, anything can slide backwards. We have to be vigilant. But I'm actually quite excited about it.
Great. So then one more question is there from Aidan Charlie. And he asked, have you ever felt stuck and couldn't come up with new ideas? Everyone's fear, I guess. I think every creative person has.
New ideas?
Sorry?
What do you do if you can't come up with new ideas?
Yeah, we all have that fear. Every creative person has that fear, I guess.
I had that fear today. Well, number one, it's get out of your head and go meet people, talk to people. I understand right now we can't do that, but you can do it on Zoom. I'm doing it right now. I'm meeting you all the way across the ocean, right? Try to get out of your space. And I know that's super hard, but even just in another book, read, go paint a painting. Sometimes I go and do a different kind of art form. I listen to people's stories to get inspiration. And then, honestly, sometimes it's just sweat. It's just sitting there. So I was talking to a young emerging writer and I was like, okay, I want 100 one-sentence ideas of what that could be. And he was like, what? Like 20? And I was like, no, 100. And yeah, a lot of them are going to be ridiculous. Like, oh my God, the aliens could land. It doesn't matter because that ridiculousness will suddenly, again, the resistance in the brain will let go and something will come up. So the other great thing to do if you're looking for ideas is in The Artist's Way, the book, The Artist's Way, she recommends morning pages, and morning pages are you sit and you don't take your pen off the page for you do that every morning for 2 weeks. You're gonna have stuff come up.
I've done it.
Right?
Yeah,
I
I've
used
done it.
morning pages though at night because I found my brain was more, in the morning, my brain wanted to like be a good soldier and get things done.
Yeah.
But at night, a lot of that stuff would start to come up. So I did night pages and I would write 3 pages of whatever
In
happened.
the Artist's Way, it talks collectively about everyone creative. Just do it. Whatever you're trying to do, if you want to write or if you want to sing or whatever it is, just write it down the first thing you wake up. And it was amazing. It brings out a lot of change in us. It did in me. I personally have the feeling. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love that.
A book. It was an amazing book too. Yeah. And
amazing.
And next question is from Hiranmay Naran, and she asked that the theme this year is embracing diversity. As a writer, if you need to write about a character whom you do not relate to in any way, do you have any discussions with people who are more like that character before starting the writing process?
No, of course. Lots, many. I was a producer for a movie that Jane Anderson wrote called The Baby Dance. It was on Showtime. And it was about a woman who was poor in America, the American South, and living in a trailer park. And she was so poor that she was pregnant and going to give up her baby for adoption because she could not afford to she already had too many kids. And the movie was about the adopted parents coming in to take the child and them, the relationship that formed. So, Jane Anderson really taught me that, she does tremendous research. She went down south and she spoke to the women who were living that life. And it's an honoring and a respect that you need to do as a writer. Absolutely. You have to do that.
Yeah. Okay. And we have a comment from Nimisha Jain. It's not a question, it's just a comment she has to share. My daughter, when she was 4, saw The Good Dinosaur for the very first time. She reacted a bit aggressively to the scene of the dad's death. She did not talk to me for that day as it came as a bit of a shock to her. But the next day she came to me saying, Mama, I want to finish watching it. And she did. We lost a close family member recently and she was able to understand. Thanks for filling those gaps, which would be difficult to bridge as a parent.
I know it was a very hard scene. It's very, it's like the scene in it's like the scene in The Lion King, right? When the dad dies. Disney does tend to have parent deaths, don't they? I do think that again, if we're being authentic with our experiences, the children start to process it. I mean, if you think about fairy tales, they're dealing with deep stuff too, right? Deep fears, and that kids need to be able to talk about that. They need to be able to experience it and talk about it. So from our perspective, it is just about trying to be honest and authentic. So that's just what I would say about that.
There are certain elements that has to be addressed, but then it's very difficult as a parent to do. I think the movies, cater to that, and kids get to learn from it a lot of emotional elements as well.
Yeah.
So yeah. So there is one more question. There are a lot of questions for you, Meg. So does current projects at Pixar, like Turning Red and Afton Corbin's film mean that we can expect even more such initiatives from Pixar in the future? Younger and newer voices and newer narrative styles. Jace is asking that.
Yeah, I think that Pixar and everybody is always pushing, and they are pushing to new voices. And so, yeah, I hope so. I have no inside scoop other than, I do know some of the women artists coming up, but I don't have any specific scoopage to give you.
Okay. So thank you very much, Meg, for this beautiful conversation and for taking us through the nuances of screenplay writing. So it is now, we are coming to the close of the session.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's our privilege.
Everyone. So thank you so much for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Meg. So, okay. All right. Good day. Bye-bye.
Okay. Action.
Where the lights fade away, another day brightens up. Look around you, don't feel alone. As we sing together, let's all wish to stay like this forever. Let's all clap our hands as we sing together. Let's shout and say, the fun begins here. Let's all snap our fingers as we sing together. Let's all wish to stay like this forever. Let's all clap our hands as we sing together. Let's shout and say, the fun begins here. Fade away, another day brightens up. Look around you, don't feel alone.